guys, and in this video I'd like to discuss a process called hematopoesis. And what are we dealing with? Hematopoesis, hemato blood, poesis development or production, right? What we are doing here is we are looking at the production and development of the formed elements of blood. And so we're going to be looking at formed elements. Remember that blood is composed of plasma and formed elements, etc. And if you want to see more information on that topic, you can see my blood lecture that I'll be making as well, a whole series of this. I figure this would be a great one to get started off. So what we want to do is first off kind of get ourselves started with thinking about blood cells and where they all come from. That's the first thing. Now, every cell that's in our blood all begin their life as a cell called a hemocytoblast. And what this tells us a lot is it's a blood cell stem cell, right? Sitting in bone tissues, what we have here. So what we've got, so these cells, of course, are nucleated cells, and this is a nucleated cell, and this cell is going to divide and become two distinctive lineages of cells, which are going to be crucial for us to understanding before we go into the process full on, is that there are two unique cell lineages that I want to show you guys. And the first set here are your RBCs that come off of here, the WBCs, and the platelets. Now, what we've got here, there is a cell line referred to as a myeloid stem cell. And myeloid stem cells are derived when the hemocytoblast, when it goes through its division, and this is going to create a unique cell here. Now, the other one is a lymphoid stem cell. And a lymphoid stem cell, what it's only going to divide up into is lymphocytes, right? And these lymphocytes, which are another cell, sorry, I start missing some things here. Lymphocytes, these are, of course, your T cells, your B cells, and your natural killer cells. And we'll talk more about those in later on videos and some other things, but we wanted to kind of get started with this and see what's going on here. Now, just as a quick rule of thumb, just to kind of give you guys words, when we see words like blast, this means it's immature. If we see the word cyte, we're going to know this means it's mature, right? And this would be something I'll talk about later on throughout this video. So we want to start off with talking about each set of cells and remembering the cell lineages that give birth to them. And the very first set of cells we're going to talk about are red blood cells, or erythrocytes. Now, let's remember that all cells, every single cell that comes out of here, right, all begins its life as a cell called a hemocytoblast, right? This is every single cell in the blood, right? They all started their life out as a hemocytoblast. Now, the little blue dot showing you guys that this cell is nucleated, which is crucial to later on kinds of things. Now, remember, there is a division that occurs here. Now, this division, first division here, let me draw that a little bit closer, by the way, because I want to kick myself if I run out of room, is this nucleated cell. Remember, we can go and divide what is called a myeloid stem cell, right? A myeloid stem cell. And that is, of course, going to give rise, myeloid stem cells could create red blood cells, could create most of your white blood cells, or it also could create what is called a platelet, ultimately. We'll see how this happens. Now, here's when we start seeing. There is a cell here called a proerythroblast. A proerythroblast. And there is some modifications that are happening here. A proerythroblast. Now, remember, blast, these are stem cells, immature cells, right? Now, what's going to then happen is this cell goes on and differentiates into what is called an erythroblast. Now, erythroblasts have various stages that we are going to discuss, but there is an erythroblast. Now, this erythroblast here, one of the interesting things is finally, this is the point where this guy will anucleate and the nucleus is ejected. So, erythroblast at various stages of development of erythroblasts. What will happen is it will eject nucleus, right? Erythroblast ejects the nucleus. It enucleates, right? And then what is going to happen is there is another unique cell that continues on called a reticulocyte. And I'm going to write it up here. Reticulocyte. Now, this is letting you know we are a little bit more mature. Now, it's still got to go through and mature. And what is it ultimately going to mature into is a fully on mature red blood cell, RBC, an erythrocyte, right? An erythrocyte. So what we're dealing with here is our erythrocyte. And this erythrocyte, of course, is a mature RBC, okay? So, in order to help you remember that, a little mnemonic I use, because these are RBCs, is RBC, Randy, His Majesty, probably eats rotten manure for a mature RBC. Randy, RBC, His Majesty, probably eats rotten manure. And we can use that silly little mnemonic to help us remember this particular thing. Now, a couple of things I note that's very crucial for us to pay close attention to here is, of course, when the ejection of the nucleus occurs here. And also that the mature RBCs are anucleated is another thing to pay attention. And then the last big thing also, remember that myeloid stem cells are these cells from the first cell line from the hemocytoblast. Now, what we're going to pay attention to next is the next set of cells that are going to differentiate that we're going to worry about is a WBC. So let me use kind of a yellowish for WBCs, white blood cells. And white blood cells, if we begin our cells, we're going to think about these cells and their lineages. Now, again, as all cells that are red blood cells or white blood cells or platelets begin themselves as, is a cell called a hemocytoblast. So I'm going to put hemocytoblast, HCB for short, because of the just room on the app here. Now, that differentiates, of course, the first cell line that will derive from this will be a myeloid stem cell, right? A myeloid stem cell. And then this cell, now, generally speaking, we are going to refer, for many of these cells, to what is called a progenitor cell. And a progenitor cells, now technically speaking, red blood cells do have progenitor cells as well, but we're not discussing them in this course. But what we want to see is with progenitor cells, we will, and of course, you know, we're still nucleated here, is we're going to move to what is called a myeloblast. A myeloblast. And the myeloblastic cells, right, these are going to give rise to a myelocyte. Now, that means this is a more mature kind of cell. Now, ultimately, this process, as it continues on, we're going to give rise to another cell called a band cell. Now, typically what I like to do here is kind of discuss band cells very briefly. Band cells all kind of have this very abnormally shaped nucleus that's somewhat of a kind of a bean shape, which is why some of the nuclei of some of the white blood cells who are mature have such an unusual shape. And then what we're going to finally see is the very last cell here is our leukocytes, or that we're dealing with our white blood cells, our leukocytes, which are also a type of mature cell, white blood cell. Now, the leukocytes that these differentiate into are the granular cytes, the bin granular, right? Bin granular. The basophils, the eosinophils, and the neutrophils, right? These are the various kinds. The bad on you phils, the easy on you phils, and the neutrophils. Bin granular, right? The granulocytes. So these are what is being given rise here. So these differentiate into these various kinds of leukocytes. And what we'll see, a little mnemonic that I use here is since it's WBCs, we'll say this is Wilma. Wilma, Her Majesty probably makes many. And then, of course, band cell. I almost forgot to write band cell. Many bad latkes. Some. I know it's silly. Wilma, WBC, Her Majesty probably makes many bad latkes. Now, as we turn our attention away from these two big cells, we're going to deal with the last cell here, who has a myeloid stem cell in its particular set here. And we're going to look at platelets. Platelets, which are really, a lot of times we call these thrombocytes, but they're not true thrombocytes because they are shedded fragments off of a cell that we're going to learn here. Now, with this one, we're going to begin ourselves here with our hemocytoblast, right? We are dealing with a hemocytoblast, like all cells that are found in the blood, right? Hemocytoblast. And that will give rise to a myeloid stem cell. And the myeloid stem cell that we're going to deal with here, I'm going to put this up here. Now, like I said, this is the last one that does a myeloid stem cell. I'm going to abbreviate SC for short. Just, very difficult right now, kind of getting difficult to write with this one right now. So, now with the myeloid stem cell, we do have another cell here called a progenitor cell. And then this is when we're going to stop looking at where these guys be looking the same, so to speak, called a progenitor cell. And what I want to show you guys is that what happens here is this cell becomes a very large, blabbed out sort of cell with a fairly large nucleus, referred to as a megakaryocyte. And what the megakaryocyte will do is flake off and give rise to all these individual platelets. Now with platelets, let's say this is Patty, right? Patty, Her Majesty, packs meat patties. Patty, Her Majesty packs meat patties. Silly little mnemonic that I devised for that as well. Now, lastly, we're going to look at our lymphocytes. And for the lymphocytes, what we'll see with lymphocytes, and you'll want to probably look at some other videos on the lymphocytes and discuss these guys a little bit more in depth. But now, lymphocytes, which do make some of the white blood cells, right? Specifically, lymphocytes is second most abundant of the white blood cell formed elements. So what we're going to look at, but lymphocytes are unique. Lymphocytes, like all other cells in the blood, do begin their life as a hemocytoblast, as every cell in the blood does. Now, what we're going to see with this is they become, instead of becoming a myeloid stem cell, it divides and becomes the lymphoid stem cell, right? Two of the lymphoid stem cell. It becomes two of the different distinctive cells there in that lineage. So once we go into that, there is a cell called a lymphoblast. A lymphoblast. And then with the lymphoblast, we do have a cell called a prolymphocyte, which I'll talk about, prolymphocyte. And the prolymphocyte continues on to become a lymphocyte. Now, lymphocyte, when I draw a lymphocyte, I'm going to draw it very different to all these other cells. Lymphocytes, we often sometimes call these guys the naked nucleus, because lymphocytes have such a large prominent nucleus with just a thin halo of cytoplasm around it. Sometimes we call them naked nucleus because you really won't be able to see these guys more than just its nucleus, and so it's a lymphocyte. Now, the lymphocytes, as you guys know, go out to create one of the white blood cells, which are called the A granulocytes. So these give rise to all A granulocytes. And remember, Ben granular, well, there is the M and the L, right? The M and the L. The A granulocytes, lymphocytes, which we're going to talk about those, and monocytes. So these guys, lymphocytes, remember, ultimately go on to become either the B cells, the T cells, or the natural killer cells. And then the monocyte, which helps us fight, it's a phagocytic cell, as we'll see. So with this one, the little mnemonic that I use is, now this is Larry. Larry has lost lollipops lately. Larry has lost lollipops lately. So with this, there are a few things that I want to go back and just kind of show you guys a few things here about kind of a recap real quick. Because the big thing is there are only one of two options that you can be. You can differentiate a hemocytoblast into a myeloid stem cell or a lymphoid stem cell. Myeloid stem cells, remember, are going to give rise to red blood cells, most of the white blood cells, with the exception of the monocytes and lymphocytes, and the platelets. The lymphocytes, which are derived only from the lymphoid stem cells, includes the T cells, the B cells, and the natural killer cells. And we can see that throughout this entire process here that a hemocytoblast, where they all start, but the myeloid stem cells are for red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, where the lymphocytes and the monocyte all derive from ultimately from a lymphoid stem cell, which is also very unique there. So this concludes my video on hematopoiesis. I hope you find it useful. Please give me some feedback on some videos you'd like to see, and that'll be it for this video. Thank you, and have a great day.